It's not just about the numbers, it's about actually feeling like you're doing a good job for your clients, but more importantly, you're doing a good job for your employees, is to be pretty discerning about who gets to stay in your firm. Because I've noticed if you have somebody that's not a good fit, they're going to bleed all over everyone else and make their job really rough too. So it's about being a leader and doing the things that, sometimes are unpopular in order to create the best experience for everyone on my team.
Hi, welcome back to the Law Firm Success Story series. And I will tell you, today we are going to be talking about a topic that impacts so many different law firms, and that is staffing, being able to attract and keep the right people on your team. Because at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do as a law firm owner. But when you get to a certain point, you need the right people on your team. And so we're going to bring on our guest today, Valerie. Welcome to the show, Valerie. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, Valerie, for people who may not have come across your firm before or seen you online, can you give us a little bit of your backstory on your firm and the type of law you practice?
Yeah, sure. My firm's Fenchel Family Law, and we're a family law firm in the San Francisco Bay Area. I started the firm 8.5 years ago. I knew I wanted to be a firm, not a solo practitioner, but I didn't really know how far I'd go and how big my firm would become. And it feels good to have been on this journey, but it's not an easy journey. There's peaks and valleys, but I think it's important to just always be in a seat of learning and curiosity to figure problems out as they come.
Gotcha. Awesome. Now, I guess within that 8 years, so how many people do you have on your team now?
Okay, we have 8 people right now.
Nice, nice, awesome. Now, I will say is, the interesting thing that a lot of attorneys are having is finding the right people on their team. So, I guess how has that journey been for you of finding these 8 people who would come onto the team and be part of the mission of what you're doing in your firm?
Yeah, I think running a business is an evolving process, just like being human in general, right? What my firm was and who I was 8 years ago is different than I am today. So I think the kind of people I'm attracting now are different back then, and my hiring and recruiting processes and all that has kind of transformed over the years. I think when I started my firm, it was more about me, this is Valerie Fenchel's firm. We were all in person, and it was a movement. I had all these little interns helping me, and I had a paralegal and an associate attorney. We're all just trying to figure it out together. And now we've become a little bit more mature and almost a little bit more corporate, I guess, where I have a bit more policies and procedures and kind of a bit more criteria of what I'm looking for. But I think a commitment to integrity and excellence, which sounds kind of random, but I think that's become really critical to me as my firm grows. Because my first year in business, I was able to manage every piece of my business myself. And at this point, I'm not. And especially the senior level people that come to the table, they need to be senior attorneys that are able to handle their own caseload in a manner that makes me super proud, in a manner where I'd want to refer my family member or friend to them and know that they were in good hands. So I think that's kind of my mindset's kind of shifted a bit as my business has matured.
Awesome. So there's a couple of questions in that I want to ask. The first one was, what was it like for you? And was it emotional when you got to that point where you were like, hey, the firm, I don't have my hands in everything. I do need to trust other people to do stuff that, I just don't have the capacity to do. So was that a emotional or was that a easy transition for you to make?
Yeah, I think that it's different for every employee, right? Like, if it's an employee that's just killing it and is a rock star, like I have a senior attorney now where I just don't bother her because everything she does is incredible. Clients love her, and she's so precise and meticulous that I don't want to bring her down. I just want to help her rise, and I want to be her champion. So I think it's about feeling out your people, because I think you can't just do set and forget for everyone because you can't do that with a law firm, right? We're too anxious and we don't want to commit malpractice, right? But I think it's about kind of seeing how people show up that work for you and assessing how they're doing, how things are going, and then slowly taking off their training wheels, not because they ever needed training wheels on their end, but because as a business owner, you have to kind of put on the training wheels to make sure you feel comfortable with what they're doing, and then slowly give them room to fly, and then check in every once in a while. But I mean, what I never want to do is make someone that's extremely competent feel like I'm like always checking on them and not trusting them, right? Because trust is a big deal, for any really high performing employee. But yeah, it's been a process for me. When I started my firm, I reviewed every email that
Wow.
came out of my office, and that's just how it was. And I continued to review every email up into I think it's 2 years ago, where I got rid of our team distribution list because it was breaking all of our inboxes. And all of a sudden, I had to let go of that a little bit and learn more about making sure I onboarded and trained and supervised people the way that needed to be done.
Awesome. I love to hear that when firms are able to get to that point of just starting to let some stuff go. I mean, because that sounds very stressful to read every email.
Yeah, sometimes honestly, I still review everyone's emails sometimes, and
Mhm.
it's not because I'm looking to make sure it's good. It's because it just makes me really happy. I'm like, wow, that was great, because I think it's equally or more important to give people positive feedback. Like, I was just looking at our senior attorney's emails, and I was like, that's amazing. So I shared it with my team, and I was like, this is a great template. If that's okay, let's use this for everyone. This was great. I think lawyers are so hard on themselves that it can be nice to just be someone's champion and point out what they're doing right, because they often aren't telling themselves that. And sometimes family law clients, even when you're doing a really good job, giving their attorney like words of affirmation isn't really on their checklist of the day.
Gotcha. That makes sense. That makes sense. This is something that a lot of attorneys and law firm leaders that I talk to tell me, like, is a challenge of that, figuring out that right pattern of when to let go. How do you really adapt your approach depending on the specific employee? So, I've heard this isn't something you learn in law school. So I guess at what point in your journey did you start to kind of learn those leadership skills to be able to understand and read the situation to know, okay, all right, what type of employee is this? Or what pace do we need to take in letting go or taking off those training wheels?
Yeah, I think it's different depending on the role, right? Like for an attorney, I worked for an amazing boss before I started my firm, and I watched how she kind of mentored and supervised me and then let me fly. So I had that as like a really great role model or example for me to kind of emulate. But as far as administrative staff, I've learned it's all about creating the right systems and checklists and really taking pride in the details, and also kind of better understanding how your administrative person learns, because it's all kind of part of the same deal. It's not about your administrative person screwing up and you being hard on them, right? It's about bringing it together as a team and figuring out what support structures need to be in place for them to thrive. So yeah, I think it just depends on the role, like what recipe is going to work. And then it's also saying, oh gosh, this really isn't working. You've got to go sometimes. And that's, really uncomfortable and it's really heartbreaking, but part of growing a firm with integrity, where it's not just about the metrics. It's not just about the numbers. It's about actually feeling like you're doing a good job for your clients, but more importantly, you're doing a good job for your employees, is to be pretty discerning about who gets to stay in your firm. Because I've noticed when if you have somebody that's not a good fit, they're going to bleed all over everyone else and make their job really rough too. So it's about being a leader and doing the things that sometimes are unpopular in order to create the best experience for everyone on my team.
Nice. Now, you also mentioned about documenting your processes and having those procedures. Was that something you learned through like a coaching program, or that just something you observed from others? Like, where did you develop that mindset of, what, we're going to document these processes?
Yeah, I think it was with my receptionist when I had a brick and mortar office. I noticed my receptionist just would forget to do things, and she was sitting at the front of office. And so I probably sound like a huge jerk, but I had this checklist of opening office checklist of all the things she needed to do first thing in the morning. And I just taped it on a piece of paper next to her head. I said, please do these things, because I felt like if it was right there, she'd remember to do it. Just like for me, my passwords, I have them on like post-its on my computer, even though you're not supposed to, right? I feel like if it's in front of my head, I'm going to do it. I didn't do it to be mean or to be a dictator, but it's just certain things just need to be done. And I think as an employer, sometimes we think people can read our minds, like there's common sense, but there's really not. And I started coaching other lawyers kind of on how to build their family law firms. And I noticed the same thing. It's like that irritation you feel where you get angry or you feel like the employee's just not doing what they're supposed to do. A lot of time it's because you haven't actually communicated with them what they're supposed to do in a way where they really understand. I think most people are trying to do the best job they can. They're not trying to screw up your business. So I think it's like meeting with them on a human level to figure out what that looks like. And I don't think always writing out all of your policies and procedures is the answer, because a lot of employees are busy working and they don't have time to read your policies and procedures. So it's also going over it with the person and making sure they understand it, and not just understand it, but they understand like why it's important to you, right? Like what's the
Mhm.
purpose of it. And I think that can really help too.
Yeah, I love that point because I've seen several firms that have gone the route of just documenting everything, and then they end up having like this really thick book. And
Mhm.
I'm just like, well, who actually has taken time to read that? And they're like, we have our processes documented, but I'm like, is anyone actually consuming it in the way that you put it together? And so I absolutely love that you mentioned that about just really helping people understand the purpose behind it. And hey, maybe you have to adapt to actually meet with them and go through it with them. That's a very excellent point.
Totally. And then also maybe your processes are terrible. You know, like I think part of running a business of high performing people is also respecting their opinions, right? Like I used to have a weekly case status meeting where we'd all have to say what was going on in each of our cases every week. And they were like, Val, this is super time consuming and it doesn't feel like you have to look over my shoulder anymore. Like, could we just do once every 2 weeks? Great. And now we're more like sharing our wins, or it's moments to collaborate on kind of complex, tough subjects or get other people's input, because it's no longer about looking over your shoulder, right? It's more about building the team culture and having everyone enjoy their job more. So I think it's also okay to not be so static. I think the problem with having a Bible of policies and procedures is that stuff's going to change as you attract different caliber of people, and you have to let other people's ideas in, or at least I do, because I don't want to be the dictator of this creepy Valerie and Associates firm. I want to actually be like champion for senior attorneys and watching and helping them rise. So I guess it's kind of a different kind of dynamic.
Mhm. Awesome. I love it. Well, I will say from our brief conversation so far, I can see why other family law firms would want to come to you to learn from what you're doing. And so I guess if people are interested in learning more about your firm, and I guess, do you do any of the mentoring and coaching for other firms
Yeah, I do
still?
sometimes. To be honest
Okay.
with you, I'm spending most of my time kind of building out my team right now and building out our
Okay.
culture and establishing our administrative leadership team. And if you're an experienced family law attorney, come work for me. But yeah, if you go to powerhouselawyer.com, I think you can schedule a meeting if you're interested in coaching for a family law firm. I don't really take on that many people, but it is something I'm passionate about. So I will still, mention it here.
Awesome. I love it. Now, if people want to learn more about your firm, where can they go online to learn more about your firm?
Yeah, it's fenchel And I also started just chatting on LinkedIn all the time. So you can also follow me on LinkedIn, and that's a good place to connect to.
Awesome. I love it. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on, sharing a bit of your story, your insight, and your wisdom. Valerie, it's been a pleasure having you on. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. It's been fun.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Law Firm and Finance Show, where we give you great content that helps you build a more successful law firm. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on all platforms and follow us for more content.